All right, y'all can grab a seat. Welcome to Freshley. My name is Daniel. If we haven't met, and I've met very few of you, so nice to meet you. Super excited y'all are here with us. Welcome to college. Welcome to Freshley. I get the joy of sharing most Monday nights here with y'all. So what you just experienced is kind of what Freshley is like. Is we come in, we worship, we do some announcements, make sure you get all the info about everything. We worship for a while. I'll talk, usually for around 15 minutes or so, maybe a little longer tonight because we don't have small groups. Those start next week. And then you would break out into small groups. So we love Monday nights. The reason we do, Cam mentioned this earlier, but the reason we do Freshley on Monday nights is because Wesley's on Wednesday in this room. It's amazing. I hope you come if you get the chance. But Wesley can be a little intimidating, especially if you're trying to meet people, right? And you're coming in as a freshman. We want to make sure you surround yourself with a community of believers who can encourage you in your walk. And so that's why we have this separate service on Monday just for y'all. It's not that y'all can't go to Wednesday. We'd love to see you on Wednesday. But it's more, we love to speak specifically to where y'all are at as you're transitioning into college, and then surround you with people who can encourage you and support you along the way. So if you're in school on a Monday, we'll be here having Freshley, 8 o'clock. A little bit about me. I am, like I said, my name is Daniel. I was a freshman at UGA back in 2003 when y'all were like just being born. But I'm originally from Gwinnett County. I went to Brookwood High School, came up here, drove 316, and I did Wesley. Except back then, it wasn't called Freshley on Monday nights. It was just called Freshman. So you just said like, hey, I'm going to Freshman tonight. And we all thought it was fine. Now looking back, you're like, it's not the best name. But I came to freshman. I did all 4 years at UGA. I graduated. I was involved at Wesley. I met my wife here. We got married right after we graduated. We both came on staff at Wesley. And I've been on staff ever since. So this is my 19th year in Athens. My, I think, 16th year being on staff at Wesley. I have 3 daughters, Nora, Lily, and Molly, who are 11, 9, and 6. And one of my greatest joys, though, is just being able to be here with y'all on Mondays because I love the freshman year experience. I love the freshman year experience, and this is why. Is because my freshman year was an incredibly pivotal year for my spiritual growth way back when I was a freshman. And so I love getting the chance to talk with y'all. One of the fun things about still being here, right? Y'all are always 18 to 19 years old, and I keep getting older and older. So in some ways, the campus has changed, right? Like, I lived in Creswell, that's still there, room 904, if any of y'all are on the 9th floor. But are any of y'all in the new dorm? You're christening the new dorm? That's where our Bolton was. So Bolton was there, not down. The Bolton that y'all eat at now was a parking lot. What y'all call the MLC was just called the SLC because it was the Student Learning Center. Now y'all have a completely different SLC. Down Lumpkin where Terry College of Business is, those were all frat houses at some point, right? So the campus has changed a lot in the last 19 years. But here's the crazy thing. While the campus has changed a lot in my time here in Athens, most of it has stayed the exact same. Like, y'all have changed, y'all are new people, but even the freshmen coming in, you still struggle with the same things, you still ask the same questions, because you're all embarking on this new journey in life. O House, 19 years ago and still today, is still the worst dining hall. Parking, yeah, thank you, it is the worst dining hall. And if you booed that, raise your standards, okay? If you booed that, raise your standards. Number 2, parking services is still horrible. Always has been. Always has been. Always has been. But here's the cool thing. The cool thing is this, is that throughout all my 19 years here, is this place has always been a spiritual home and refuge for people. And it's our hope that it becomes that for you this year. And throughout the 19 years I've been here, there has been a question that has always come up, and it might take different forms or look a little different, but a question that people always seem to have, whether it be the freshmen or maybe their parents or people who are coming in or your leaders at church. And it's this basic question of this is, can I grow spiritually in college? Because the truth is that 60% of people lose their faith if they have it coming into college. They leave college having left their faith. 60%. That means if the statistics hold, this whole half of the room would not be walking with the Lord in 4 years. Isn't that crazy? So can I grow spiritually in college? Especially, there's a little caveat to that question, especially at UGA, because what is UGA known for? Right? Did you ever have this conversation with anyone? I know I did way back when I was coming in the freshman year. I'd be like talking to someone at church and be like, where are you going to college? I'd be like, I'm going to UGA. And they're like, really? It's like, do you know what they do there? Have you heard of downtown? Like more bars per square foot than any other place in the world. You're going there? Truth. I like to tell it like it is. You have people that you probably knew who chose to not go here because they weren't sure if they could grow spiritually. They went to, a different school or maybe went to a private Christian school. So there's this question, you're a week into school, less than that. And so can I grow spiritually in college? That's a question that we need an answer to. And so to kind of go at that, I want to share a story out of the book of Acts. Chapter 17, there's this guy named Paul. So Paul comes to know Jesus through this radical encounter. You can read about in Acts chapter 9. And then he starts planting all these churches around the Mediterranean. And so he actually ends up in this story in Athens. Obviously Greece, not Georgia. And I'm not trying to be like punny here. It's the story. It just so happened to happen in Athens. And so he walks around. And at this point in Athens, there's these idols to all these different gods everywhere. And so he starts preaching about Jesus was raised from the dead and the resurrection of the dead. And so the philosophers gather him up and they say, hey, come and speak to our people. You have some new ideas. Let's hear what you have to say. And this is part of Paul's sermon he gives in Athens about 2,000 years ago. And he says this. He says, the God who made the world and everything in it is the Lord of heaven and earth and does not live in temples built by human hands. And he is not served by human hands as if he needed anything. Rather, he himself gives everyone life and breath and everything else. From one man, he made all the nations that they should inhabit the whole earth. And he marked out their appointed times in history and the boundaries of their lands. God did this so that they would seek him and perhaps reach out for him and find him, though he is not far from any one of us. For in him we live and move and have our being. So the point that Paul was trying to make, a few different points, he's like, hey, you have all these temples you've built to all these gods. The actual creator God is way too big to be housed by any human building. And in addition to that, he is so big that he has moved history in such a direction because he wants people to reach out for him and find him so that he may know them and they may know him so that he could be in relationship with them. And the truth is this, is that whether they were in Jerusalem or whether they were in Athens or wherever they were in the world, that God was actually not far from them. You see, the picture that Paul paints here of God in this story is a God who is constantly reaching out and wanting to encounter human beings, who wants to change their life, who longs to be with his people. A God who is not far from anyone and is accessible to everyone who would seek out to seek him and find him and reach him. And so I think that has huge implications for us. Because if God is not far from us, if that is true, if God is not far from us no matter where we are, no matter where, if you're at your hometown or you're in Athens, Georgia, one of the biggest party schools in the nation, right? If God is really not far from us and he wants to be with us, and if he has moved history in such a way so that people would reach out and seek him and find him, if that is true, then our spiritual growth is going to be largely determined by the space we choose to give God in our lives. If this is true, if God really is near to us, then our spiritual growth is not determined by our location. It's not even determined by the temptations around us. What it is determined is by the space that we choose to give God in our life. That God looks at us and he says, hey, well, what do you want? What do you want? It's like I've mentioned before, I have been here a while, and I would say in my time in Athens, I've seen 3 different types of Christians, and they all start with C, and I kind of hate that because I'm not trying to be like, here's the 3 C's to a better future, but it's just the way it worked out, and so I just had to run with it, right? So I've seen 3 basic types of Christians in my time in Athens. That there's the casual Christian who gives God some space in their life. That there's the committed Christian who makes sure that God has a space in their life. And then there's the consecrated Christian who gives God all the space in their life. I want to say those one more time because I think this is really important, because I think everyone in this room, we're one of these 3. The casual Christian who gives God some space in their life. The committed Christian who makes sure God has a space in their life. Or the consecrated Christian who gives God all the space in their life. And I know each of these roles because I have been each of these roles at some point in my story. Because most of my life until I was about 16 years old, I was a pretty casual Christian. And what I mean by that is this, is I believed God existed. I wanted to go to heaven when I died. I went to church when I wanted to. I went when they were doing something fun, right? I went when there was some sort of event. Maybe I'd go on a retreat here and there. I would especially go if the girl I had a crush on was going, right? That was the biggest motivator for me. But my life was largely, I was going to go about my business, and if God just so happened to intersect it, great. But if not, no big deal. There was no commitment there. Why? Because I was just a casual Christian. I was just going to live my life. I was going to take hold of my future, and I was going to just walk out my life. And if God just so happened to cross paths, if my schedule was clear so I could go to church that week, or if my future plans just so happened to line up with maybe what God would want for me, great. But if not, no big deal. And then I went away to a camp. I kind of committed my life to the Lord when I was about 17 years old. And after that, I would say that I became a committed Christian so before I kind of gave God a space if it worked out, but it was casual, I was like, yeah, whatever, no big deal. But then I kind of became a committed Christian. So I wanted to make sure that I gave God a space in my life. So when the church had something, I would be there. Kind of even going into the first half of my freshman year, when freshman was happening on a Monday night, I would be there. When Wesley was happening on a Wednesday night, I would be there because I wanted to give God a space in my life. I would worship, I would listen to the sermons. I would go to small group. I would discuss, but here was the breakdown, is I would give God a space in my life. And what that meant was this, is when I was here, I was all about God. But then when I left here, I was just about me. Right? I gave God a space in my life, but my walk with God never actually integrated into the other parts of my life. And so I came on Mondays, or I'd come on Wednesdays when I was in college, or I'd be really involved in church before then. I was even a leader. I did all the right things. I checked all the right boxes, but the whole time I actually had really deep, big issues going on in my heart, issues of pride, issues of control, issues of sin that I wouldn't even open up to God because I didn't want to. Because I wanted to give God a space, but I didn't want to give him the whole thing. Because that means I'd have to give up control. That means I'd have to give him a say in what I did with my future. That means I'd have to start getting real about some of the things that I was struggling with at that time. And I just wanted to keep the pretty face up for everyone to see. I wanted my reputation to be a certain something. I wanted to be known as a certain thing. So I can't be honest about those things I'm struggling with, because then what if people knew? What would they think about me? Right? That I cared about God. I believed in God. I'd show up. I'd be here every week, but there was very little access God actually had to my heart. You see, here's the problem with kind of a casual Christianity or even a committed Christianity is it's completely different than what Paul talks about in Acts. And when we do that, what I did when I just lived as a casual Christian or a committed Christian is I reduced God to a time and a place, right? Like I met with God on Monday nights at 8 or on Wednesday nights at 8. And I reduced him to a time and a place. And I would leave large areas of my life and of my schedule, of my calendar, just completely shut off from God. And as we learn in the book of Acts that God is too big to live in houses built by human hands, right? That's the issue. The issue with just giving God some of your space in your heart or make sure he has a space in your heart, that God's either kind of got it all or he's got nothing, right? And see, we can be so satisfied with just giving God kind of like second-rate devotion and passion because we compare ourselves to our peers, right? And it's like, well, look at me. Who cares that, I go out and I do A, B, C, and D because I come to Freshley on Mondays, right? But our standard was never meant to be our peers. Our standard is meant to be Jesus. That we are supposed to grow and become more like him. Listen, I want you here every Monday. I think it's great. I think it will change your life. But I don't want you just here so we can have somebody sitting in the seat so I'm like, oh, I feel good about myself. I want you here because I want to see your life transformed. I want you here because I want to see you go from a casual Christianity or just a committed Christianity where you're like, yeah, I'm committing it to my schedule, to an actual Christianity that says, God, you can have it all, transform my whole life. I give you everything. Like I said, the goal here, our goal at Freshley, it's not just to get you involved. The goal is to see you transformed into the likeness of Jesus. And about halfway through my freshman year, I can show that this is one of the cool things about being here. I can point to different parts of this room and just tell you these crazy things that God did in my life. I can tell you how I was set free, literally. Right, this stage wasn't quite as big back then, but right here when someone prayed for me, I can tell you the first time I lifted up my hands in worship because I was just like, I came from a church that didn't do that. And so, I did one of those like, where you're looking around and you're like, what's up? I'm so spiritual right now. You're like, I can tell you but for me what that was is I finally stopped caring about what other people thought about me. I can go around this room and I can tell you all these things that God did in my life once I actually gave my whole heart over to him, that I went from being just a casual Christian who gave God a space in my heart to being, or moved on from being a committed Christian who made sure God was on my schedule to being a consecrated Christian, one who just said, God, you can have it all. You can have it all. And I look back on my life and there are, you look back on your life, there's going to be things that you regret, right? There's going to be things you regret. One thing I never regret though is making the choice when I was a freshman to say, you can have it all, God. You can have it all. So my question for you tonight is this, is where are you? Where are you? Because maybe you're a casual Christian. You're here just because someone invited you or you just really want to make friends because you're scared out of your mind. Did you ever realize how lonely you could feel in a crowded room like before you came to college? It's just crazy. You can be surrounded by 40,000 other college students and feel like you're the only person in the world. Right? Maybe you're here for that. Maybe you're a committed Christian. You're like, well, I went to college and the thing I knew I wanted to do is I wanted to get on my schedule. I'm going to get involved in campus ministry. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. I'm going to make sure God's on my calendar. But I want to invite you tonight to take a step beyond those versions of Christianity and to say, God, you can have my whole heart. You can have every part about me. You can have the entirety of my college experience. Because wherever you are, even if you're not a Christian at all, I want you to know this. I want you to know that you are welcome in this community. I want you to know that you are loved exactly where you are at. But I also want you to know that our hope for you is that you would grow spiritually this year, that you would not stay where you are at. Can you grow spiritually in college? The answer is absolutely. But it's not going to happen on accident. You're not going to stumble into maturity. You're not going to wake up one day and be like, oh my gosh, I'm spiritually mature. What happens is as God first moved to us, we begin to make space in our heart for him, and then he proves to be faithful and faithful and faithful and faithful, and he transforms us little bit by little bit by little bit to where you get to the end of your freshman year and you are the same person, but you're like, oh my gosh, look what God's done. Look what God will do when I give him the space to move. Right? That we could join in with what Paul said in Athens, that in you, in God, I live and I move and I have my being. Saying more than anything else, more than any other qualifier on who I am, on what my identity is, my being is in Jesus Christ. So here's what's possible for you as I kind of wrap up. I want to end with reading a little story out of the book of 2 Chronicles. In 2 Chronicles, they're building a house. They're building a temple for the Lord, and they've just completed it. So they just finished it, and then they're praying a prayer of dedication over this building. And this is what happens. This is where we pick up 2 Chronicles 7, 1 through 3. It says, when Solomon finished praying, fire came down from heaven and consumed the burnt offering and the sacrifices, and the glory of the Lord filled the temple. The priests could not enter the temple of the Lord because the glory of the Lord filled it. When all the Israelites saw the fire coming down and the glory and the Lord was above the temple, they knelt on the pavement with their faces to the ground, and they worshiped and gave thanks to the Lord, saying, he is good, his love endures forever. What an amazing scene. Where the glory of the Lord, the presence of God becomes so thick on a physical location that you can't even enter the building. Like, that's crazy. That really happened. That's crazy. The glory comes and fills the temple. And I have to say this, that in all my 19 years here in Athens, there is rarely a time on a Monday night or a Wednesday night when I come to gather for worship in this room, to me, where I don't feel the manifest presence of God, where I don't sense his nearness and his moving and his activity in the midst of his people. Right? When you come, you should expect to encounter God. But what we learn from Paul in the book of Acts is that God does not live in temples built by human hands anymore. So the glory of God was never intended just to stay in the temple. It was meant to go out. And what my heart for you is this, is that you would come here and that you would encounter God and that he would radically transform your life, that he would just pour out purpose and meaning, and you would have understanding, that you would come to know him in a deep way, and you would experience his love and his acceptance and his grace and his transformation and his freedom. But then it wouldn't just stop with you here Monday nights from 8 to 9:30, that it would continue out throughout the rest of your week, throughout the rest of your month, throughout the rest of your life, because the glory wasn't meant just to stay in the temple. That's why we have a saying around here. You might see it on signs when you come in when the wind doesn't blow them off. You might see it on some of the shirts, and it says, I love Mondays, right? And we say that here because everyone hates Mondays, but we love Mondays because that's when we meet. So we love Mondays. But the meaning behind I love Mondays is this, is Monday night was never meant to be an escape from your life where here's an hour and a half where everything else can just go away. No, Mondays was meant to be where you come, where we worship the Lord, where we encounter God, and then you live differently for the rest of your week because of what you experienced on Monday, right? That what happens here would change the way you live on Thursday morning or Friday night or Sunday afternoon. That's what we're going for here. We're not going for just a casual Christianity that gives God a space, or a committed Christianity that just puts God on a schedule. We are going for a consecrated Christianity that just says, God, you can have it all. You can have it all. So normally, this is when I'd say, all right, let's go to small groups, but there's no small groups yet. If you haven't signed up yet, small groups are literally the best thing we do here. The worship's fantastic. My teaching is decent enough. And then the small groups, though, are where severe, like crazy life change can happen. So if you haven't signed up for those, sign up, ugawest.org, signups tab. Like I think Cam mentioned it, the application will close on Friday, but that doesn't mean you can't join a small group after that. It just means you just join it on a Monday night. You just come here. So normally I'd say, all right, we're about to go to small group, but instead I'm going to say, band, come back up, because we're going to sing one more song to end. And we always are going to end every sermon this year with both a practice and a question, because normally you'll go to small group and talk about these things. And so we're going to end with a practice because, one, we actually want to put into practice the things we talk about, right? Because we don't want to just stay with a Monday night faith. We want what we do here to challenge you the rest of your week. And then two, a question for you to discuss in small group. We don't got small group, but we're still going to do it this week. So here's your practice for the week. You can call it your homework assignment if you want, but I'm just going to call it a practice. This is what I want to challenge you to do. I want you to write down a prayer to God where you consecrate your year to him. That you would take some time this week and you would just write down a prayer to God where you consecrate your year to him in your own words. In whatever language you have with God and whatever words make sense to you, but you would find a way in your own words to write down something that says, God, this whole year is yours. And then here's the question I want you to ask yourself, and really even, to be honest, to ask God while we're singing this one last worship song before we close out, is what is the one thing you need to do most that will set you up to grow spiritually this year? What's the one thing you need to do most that will set you up to grow spiritually this year? So let's stand. We'll sing one last song together before we close out. Jesus, I thank you for these freshmen, Lord. I thank you for all the ways that you have moved in their life, even to just get them here tonight. And we pray and we ask, God, that you would come during these moments. And Lord, I want to especially pray for freshmen who haven't started off the year well. They've already stepped into things that they regret, or they've already been struggling with finding a place, or this whole situation just feels overwhelming. I pray and ask, Lord, right now that your presence would come, just like 2 Chronicles 7, that your presence, your glory would come, and it would just fill up this room. That we would experience what the psalmist says, that the nearness to God is our good. I thank you, Lord, that you're actually not far from any of us. And would you even turn this song into a holy moment where we consecrate this year and give it over to you? And it's in the name of Jesus we pray.